All right. Well, hope everyone is having a pretty good day. Thanks for coming to hang out with me and hopefully quench your curiosity thirst. I have an article or blog post today called The Tail End by Tim Urban. I have read through it before and it's a perspective shift. I think it's supposed to be. That's what it's meant to do, and it comes with some insights. So I think their intent was to sort of visualize the human life in different ways, the human lifespan, to depict it in different ways to kind of get some point across. I'll let you be the judge of that, however you want to interpret this. But let's get into it. In a post last year, we laid out the human lifespan visually by years. A 90-year human life in years. All right, pretty self-explanatory. It's what you would expect. By months, each row is 36 months or 3 years. Okay, that seems like a lot just looking at it. Because each row is 3 years and not one. So let's see it by weeks. So for some reason, this actually looks smaller than the last one. I mean, it looks less. And I would imagine if you had something like this at work on your wall in your office instead of a calendar year, this would have a much bigger impact. You know, everyone has experienced it's November already. How is it already November? Seeing this, like those people who work at their jobs for 15 years, imagine crossing each year off with this instead of a calendar. Um, it would make people think a little bit more about staying in their jobs, I'm sure. Careers, I should say. Jobs stands for just over broke. That's what my dad always used to say. JOB, just over broke. Half of a joke. While working on that post, I also made a days chart, but it seemed a bit much, so I left it out. Sharing it here. 2 rows equals 1 year. Each section equals 1 decade. Wow, that does seem like a lot, actually. Actually, no, because it's their days. So the days chart blows my mind as much as the weeks chart. Each of those dots is only a single Tuesday or a Friday or Sunday. But even a lucky person who lives to 90 will have no problem fitting every day in their life on one sheet of paper. But since doing the life in weeks post, I've been thinking about something else. Instead of measuring your life in units of time, you can measure it in activities or events. To use myself as an example, I'm 34, so let's be super optimistic and say I'll be hanging around drawing stick figures until I'm 90. If so, I have a little under 60 winners left. Yeah, when you depict it like that, it starts to take a different effect. Maybe around 60 Super Bowls left. Wow, okay. The ocean is freezing, and putting my body into it is a bad life experience. So I tend to limit myself to around 1 ocean swim a year. So as weird as it seems, I might only go in the ocean 60 more times. Yep. Hopefully he's on the west coast for those 60, so that actually East Coast water is more warm, so it's a double-edged sword. Not counting Wait But Why research, I read about 5 books a year. So even though it feels like I've read an endless number of books in the future, I actually have to choose only 300 of all the books out there to read and accept that I'll sign off for eternity without knowing what goes on and all the rest. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And there's a lot of people that might only read 5 more books in their life. I don't read books that much, and I really should. So it's an interesting thought. Growing up in Boston, I went to Red Sox games all the time, but if I never move back there, I'll probably continue at my current rate of going to Sox games about once every 3 years, meaning this little row of 20 represents my remaining Fenway visits. Wow. There have been 8 US presidential elections during my lifetime, and about 15 to go. I've seen 5 presidents in office, and if that rate continues, I'll see about 9 more. That's not too bad, actually. That's less severe than the other examples he brought up. I probably eat pizza about once a month, so I've got about 700 more chances to eat pizza. I have an even brighter future with dumplings. I have Chinese food about twice a month, and I tend to make sure six dumplings occur. I tend to make sure six dumplings occurs each time. So I have a lot of dumplings to look forward to. Yep, that's a positive one. But these things aren't what I've been thinking about. Most of these things I just mentioned happened with a similar frequency during each year of my life, which spreads them out somewhat evenly through time. If I'm around a third of my way through life, I'm also about a third of my way through experiencing the activity or event. What I've been thinking about is a really important part of that. Unlike all these examples, it isn't even spread out through time. Something whose ratio doesn't at all align with how far I am through life. I totally butchered that paragraph. What he's getting at is relationships. Okay, he's quantifying all these things above here. Now let's get into the relationships. I've been thinking about my parents who are in their mid 60s. During my first 18 years, I spent some time with my parents during at least 90% of my days. But since heading off to college and then later moving out of Boston, I've probably seen them an average of only 5 times a year each, for an average of maybe 2 times or 2 days each time. 10 days a year. About 3% of the days I spent with them each year of my childhood. Wow, okay. Being in the mid 60s, let's continue to be super optimistic and say I'm one of the incredibly lucky people to have both parents alive in my 60s. Yeah, you are definitely. That would give us, and that's a good thing. You're a fortunate person. That would give us about 30 more years of coexistence. If the 10 days a year thing holds, that's 300 days left to hang out with mom and dad. Less time than I spent with them in any one of my 18 childhood years. When you look at that reality, you realize that despite not being at the end of your life, you may very well be nearing the end of your time with some of the most important people in your life. If I lay out the total days I'll ever spend with each of my parents, assuming I'm as lucky as can be, this becomes starkly clear. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, the green is what he has left. So scroll all the way up. Kind of looks like the dumpling one. Not trying to be funny. Yeah, it's just little block. Turns out that when I graduated from high school, I had already used up 93% of my in-person parent time. I'm now enjoying the last 5% of that time. We're in the tail end. It's a similar story with my two sisters. After living in a house with them for 10 and 13 years respectively, I now live across country from both of them and spend maybe 15 days with each of them a year. Hopefully that leaves us with about 15% of our total hangout time left. You know, this is a subject that I don't think is spoken enough about in the current zeitgeist. And the reason why is because we live in like this transportable era, and I'm not trying to be all like wooey about that. Um, it's so easy to just be like, hey, I want to go live in New York. Or, hey, I want to go move to Oklahoma City, whatever it is. Love Oklahoma City, by the way. But it's just a casual thought that you can have, and you can find a job anywhere. We're really not meant to be leaving the place that has sort of shaped ourselves in the most critical times of our lives. Of course, there are some people who don't have that sense of attachment, but I think it's such a subconscious thing that we experience, that you don't realize there's something missing until you've been away for 10, 20, 30 years or so. And you might look back and say, wow, I was disconnected from the people who I felt most at ease with, because that's who you've been around growing up since childhood. And it's it's easy to kind of get distracted. And I don't know if this is going to make sense. There are some people out there that this will make sense to. Most people, I don't think they'll think I'm sounding a little crazy right now, but there's those few people that know exactly what I'm talking about. The ones that have moved away from the community that has that you have, that gave everything to you basically. And you get distracted in your current emotional situation. And you slowly start to forget like the emotional state that you were in, which was an emotional state of ease back home. And you have a little bit more stress being away from home, and you don't exactly know why that is. But I suspect it's from that. There's something kind of ingrained in you, which like is shared among those that you grew up with. And when you leave that environment, something is just not quite right. And I think that's an important thing to consider. And when you're quantifying it in numbers like this, you might read this as I'm 27, I'm reading this and I'm saying to myself, do I want to be in a position when I'm 50 years old, 60 years old, where I look back and I say, wow, I sacrificed so much time in pursuit of a career in a location that does not benefit my relationships, or that has caused me to spend so much time away from my tribe. So interesting perspective, but let's continue. The same often goes for old friends. In high school, I sat around playing hearts with the same 4 guys about 5 days a week. In 4 years, we probably racked up 700 group hangouts. Now, scattered around the country with totally different lives and schedules, the 5 of us are in the same room at the same time, probably 10 days each decade. The group is in its final 7%. So what do we do with this information? Setting aside my secret hope that technological advances will let me live to 700, I see 3 takeaways here. 1, live in the same place as the people you love matters. Yeah, absolutely. I probably have 10 times the time left with the people who live in my current city as I do with the people who live somewhere else. Priorities matter. Your remaining FaceTime with any and here's the thing. Justifying living in a different place because you have FaceTime or you can call someone on the phone is not acceptable because it's not the same thing. You will get frustrated talking to someone over a phone that you would normally actually really enjoy that conversation in person. You can't replace it. There's spontaneous events that happen when you're there in person, which matters a lot. And you guys know. Priorities matter. Your remaining FaceTime with any person depends largely on where that person falls on your list of life priorities. Make sure this list is set by you, not by unconscious inertia. Man, that is such a problem I have, actually. That is... Wow, that last term, unconscious inertia. I actually missed that the first time I read this blog. I didn't catch on to that. That's the story of my life. I've always just hung out with the person who has kind of took me along their journey with them, and it's adventurous in some instances, but it's very stressful because it's not always the type of person you want to be around. The one that's nagging you to go places or not enforcing, but imposing themselves on you. Quality time matters. If you're the last 10% of time, if you're in your last 10% of time with someone you love, keep that fact in front of your mind when you're with them and treat that time as what it actually is, precious. Yeah, I'll listen to some of my friends or coworkers or anyone I'm around when they're on the phone with when they're on the phone with their family, and you can tell in their voice they're frustrated and they kind of take it out on that person. And you just have to understand that it's more important to keep your resolve in that moment and to sort of just take that conversation for what it is. They may have said something so stupid. You may want to push back on them. You may want to tell them you're being an idiot in this situation, and sometimes that's warranted. Um, but other times you kind of have to just absorb the character of the other person if it is something that would bug you normally, and enjoy it. Soak it in. Anyways, I think that's it. uh, yeah, it's an interesting article. Started out unsuspecting, and then it goes pretty deep. So hope y'all learned something from this. I'm sure I'll listen back to this and be like, I can't believe I said that, but whatever. Um, Hope you have a good day, good week actually, and yeah, thank you for listening.